Module 9, Lesson 3, Configuring vSphere HA. After this lesson, you'll be able to recognize the requirements for creating an HA cluster and configuring an HA cluster. A cluster is a group of ESXi hosts that shares physical resources. vCenter manages this cluster resource as a single pool of resources. In the cluster, you can enable features such as HA, DRS, and if you're using vSAN to have the licensing, this is where you would enable vSAN. You would configure it by the cluster. Prereqs for HA, you need vSphere Essentials Plus Kit or higher. And this says VMware vSphere Standard Edition. This should say VMware vSphere vCenter Standard Edition. That's the vCenter you'll need to do HA. A cluster can contain at a minimum 2 hosts to as many as 64 hosts. Each ESXi host in the cluster will need a static IP. If you're using DHCP, then you need to use a method of DHCP to make sure that that host gets the same IP each time, such as a MAC reservation. All the hosts in the cluster need at least one management network in common, because as previous slide, that's how it does its heartbeats to communicate with each other and the masters and the slaves. If you want to use virtual machine monitoring, you need to have VMware tools installed in every virtual machine that you're going to monitor. And if you're using HA in clusters that have a 6.0 or higher host, then you can enable VMCP. When you create a cluster, you have to configure the settings, what you want to use, what features of HA, and how you want to restart. As you can see here, you turn it on. And then on the next screen, on failures and responses, we want to do host monitoring in this example. If we have a failure on the host, restart the VMs, just to restart them on another host. What do we want to do with our response for host isolation? It's disabled. What do you do with the data store with permanent device loss? Permanent device loss. You power off and restart the VMs. Go restart them on another host because that host is completely off. A data store with all paths down. You can either pick, you want to power off and restart, aggressive or conservative. And that'll be how quick does it want to boot them back up, turn them off and turn them back on. If you want to use virtual machine monitoring, you can do VM or disabled or VM and application monitoring. And again, when you're doing that, then all the machines you're wanting to monitor will need to have VMware tools installed. Then we can also, either we can pick for the heartbeat data stores automatic, or we can use them on the list, or we can use them from the list and they can then look automatically if there's some not in the list specified. Admission control. Admission controls will ensure that the sufficient resources are available in the cluster. And this is doing it, in this example, you pick it by percentage, and we can choose whether we want to override it or not, however we want to. But we want to make sure that when we admit machines in this cluster, we want to make sure they have the resources they need. Here's an example on using cluster resource percentage. This one, the configured failover capacity for CPU and memory is set to 25%. Our total VM reservations are 7 gigahertz and 6 gigabytes of memory. The current CPU failover capacity is 70%. We get that because we have a total of 24 gigahertz for CPU, minus the 7 because we have a reservation. And then we divide that by the total, which is 24, and that gives us 70%. Same thing with memory. We have 21 available. Subtract the 6 because we have a total VM reservation. Let's divide that by the total, 21, and we have a 71% failover capacity. So 25 would just be enough to make that work. We also can do a mission control using slots. To get this, let's calculate a slot size at 2 gigahertz because that's what each one has. So as you can see, these are sharing a slot and this is half a slot. Now we need to figure out how much can go per host. The current failover capacity is 1, so we're going to say, okay, we can lose 1 host. If 1 host fails, then we have 6 slots remaining in the cluster, which that'll be enough for all 5 of these virtual machines to work, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 slots. If both host 1 and 2 fails, it's not going to work because we need 4 slots. We won't have but 3 available. If the current failover capacity is less than the configured failover capacity, this will disallow any VMs to further power on. Performance degradation on what VMs can tolerate. You can set this in the cluster. As you can see, this one's set at 100%. That means the warning is going to be disabled, but you just got to remember we can tolerate, or we're telling it to tolerate 100% of VM degradation. In advanced options, we can set this here. You can force a cluster. This is just an example of like advanced configuration parameters we can give it. Such as in this example, if you want to force it not to use the default isolation address, you would configure this equal to false, which would look like this right here. If you want to force it to ping an alternate isolation address, you can give it here. And as you see, you've got an X, so they have 2 parameters. So they're doing it, let's ping it by name, and also here's an IP to ping. And then the default is a 30-second isolation action window. Here you can use this and set it. Like in this example is 45. HA orchestrated restart. This allows HA to enable 5 tiers for restarting a VM. You can choose these conditions. The VM has enough, is its resources secured? Is it going to have enough resources to restart? Is the VM powered on? Do I detect a heartbeat in VMware tools? Do I detect the application heartbeat? You can optionally delay a restart. So VMs can be grouped into tiers for their startup priority. So you have it in tier 1, and it makes sure, hey, I want these VMs to have their resources available first and power them on. Only when that tier is met, then let's say we have a tier 2, their priority's lower, but when tier 1's booted up, what's left over, let's boot up tier 2. And you can do that orchestrating restarts. Configure this with host monitoring. You can give it, like right here, we have the default restart priorities medium, and this is where you control the dependency, and then we give it the resources allocated on what to do. So what we can do also with an orchestrated restart, say we have a web server that uses a database. So let's say VMA right here is our web, and this is our database. Well, they need each other. Web will come up, but if they don't have a database to hook to, it's not going to read the data. Let's say VMC is it's a domain controller. Okay? Well, let's say our web server depends on B, but B don't depend on A, the web server, excuse me, I said that backwards. Let's say A depends on B because the web server has to come up that needs a database to read it. But just because the web server comes up, it might not be used. Let's say it doesn't use authentication with our company. So it don't necessarily depend on the domain controller. But we're using Active Directory authentication for our database for, let's say, the services to get the other resources that it needs for the data. It depends on the domain controller. So we can configure it to say, okay, our web server needs to boot up, but he depends on the database server. So both of them's they need to be together, need to come up around the same time. Domain controller, not necessarily, but it is dependent on the database server. So we have a dependency link between that. So then that forces it to come up. And like it shows right here, they kind of restart at the same time because B needs C and A needs B. That's just an example, but it's just showing that you can have dependency, so it kind of gives you everything as one container, so to speak. You disable host monitoring before modifying any networking components such as VM kernel ports that's configured for management or vSAN. This prevents unwanted attempts to fail over virtual machines. So if you're doing some maintenance or something, you'll want to disable host monitoring for the time being, just so you won't force any kind of failovers. Cluster resource reservation. This will report the total CPU, memory overhead, storage capacity, and the capacity reserved by the virtual machines and how much is available. You can monitor the cluster status in the monitor tab, and then in the ribbon or breadcrumb, whatever you want to call it, the vSphere HA. Should now be able to recognize the requirements for creating using HA and configure a vSphere HA cluster.